Okay, so I want to spend a bit of time now talking about a concept which I call the happy week. And the happy week is really all about sort of gaining, so it's about gaining clarity in your life. It's also about giving your team clarity. It's a way of making yourself much more productive, but it's also a way of making sure that the most important things get done at the start, as opposed to often in life. We were talking about this in one of the breakouts, weren't we? Just saying, like, you've got to put the most important things in your diary because that way they get done. Whereas otherwise it's very easy for them to slip. And I think the best example I can give of this is when I first started training for my first Ironman. And I know I've talked about this a little bit before, but I was like, well, how on earth do I suddenly find the time to basically double my training load and train every day and train for at least an hour every day? And I'd actually got a very good structured business week at this point, but I'd never thought about putting that sort of business structure approach to the non-business time, because the business coaching I'd received had done a good job of coaching me with the principles of my business work week, but I'd never had applied it. And that was kind of born out of things like Strategic Coach and Brian Tracy and things like that. But none of it had ever applied to the rest of my life. And it was only really when this realization of, right, if you get up early, do that first victory hour, and then suddenly the training for an Ironman became actually really easy. It just there was loads of time if you got up and did it first thing in the day. And it made me think about the fact that actually this happy week wasn't just about how I structured my work week, but it was how I structured all right from the moment I got up. And obviously, I know we talked about it a little bit in the break, but one of the books that influenced this a lot, which I know we've talked about before, we've done a learning lunch on it before, is the 5 a.m. Club, the Robin Sharma book. I think we've still got a few copies. I heard it mentioned earlier. If anybody would like to read it and hasn't got it, we've still got some spare copies that I'm happy to give you. So it is a brilliant book in terms of the advice. It's not the best book in terms of, I don't think Robin Sharma is going to win any literary awards for his storytelling. It is all woven into a very average story, which will have you thinking after chapter one, well, I'm not sure I really actually want to read this. But it was so good. By the time I got to the end of it, I read it straight through a second time, because the advice in there is unbelievable. And it basically talks about this concept of the victory hour and the first hour of your day, because ultimately the most successful people rise early. It's almost across the whole board, the most successful people rise early. And it also talks about the fact that it's all about these small little advances, which is something I'm going to come on to in the game of gains later on. But ultimately, this first hour of the day, this victory hour, was essentially about this 20-20-20 formula, which I just wanted to share with those people that didn't do the learning lunch, because I think it's really important. So this first hour of the day is about doing 3 things. It's about exercise, so it's about movement. It's about learning, so it's about growth, which is one of our 6 human needs. And it's about an opportunity to reflect. So for some people, that'll be journaling. Some people, that'll be meditating. I actually worked out that I needed to combine all of those, because I needed to train for an Ironman. I need an hour's training of a morning, but I'll do that whilst listening to a book, having some time to reflect and meditate whilst, active meditation whilst I'm running or swimming. And I tend to listen to books, or if I'm on the turbo trainer, Claire berates me for, I'll watch documentaries and things like that. So that's like where the David Beckham stuff comes in. But it gives you this great start to the day if you're getting a bit of time to reflect, a bit of time to learn, and you're getting your physical exercise, and you're doing it first thing, so nothing gets in the way. You're not checking your emails. It's not like we were talking about with something kicks off at work and I'm gonna have to skip it today. I just can't get there. First thing of the day, it's amazing. And this concept of listening and educating at the same time is a concept that Tony Robbins calls any time, so no extra time. So how can you build your learning into your day without, so Jim Rohn gives some amazing advice, which is if you want to be, I can guarantee you'll be wealthy beyond your dreams if you do just one thing, and that is listen to a book a week or read a book a week. But reading a book a week, particularly when you're dyslexic and very slow at reading, like I am, is very, very difficult. But listening to a book a week while you're exercising, driving, doing whatever it is that you do, actually is perfectly achievable. So I think that principle is really powerful. One of the things that I think is a really important business concept and business routine as part of the happy week is the Monday morning routine, which I've touched on a bit when we did the Limitless Life Planner. But that start of every week, thinking, okay, so I've talked about previously about the best things, which is that exercise where you go through what's the best things that have happened over the course of the last week, or what's the best things. Every meeting should start with the best things. Always start on a positive note. Annual leadership meeting, what's the best thing that's happened over the course of the last year? Quarterly leadership meeting, what's the best thing that's happened over the last quarter? But every Monday morning, the first thing I do when I sit down at my desk is, what's the best thing that happened over the course of the last week? You know what it's like on a Monday morning, particularly if you've been out on the piss with your mates over the weekend. You're like, oh God, Monday morning, here we go again. But just to spend a bit of time focusing on what's the best thing that happened business-wise and the best thing to happen personally at the start of that day is incredibly powerful. And they say that, I think Abraham Lincoln said, if you give me an hour to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 45 minutes sharpening the axe. My first hour of every Monday morning once I get to the office, so after I've done my exercise and my normal, that victory hour, is firstly thinking about, well, okay, what's the best thing to happen over the course of the last week? What are my month's goals? What goals have I said I'm going to achieve this week? And what have I got to do this week to be on track to achieve those month's goals? Because it doesn't take long. Once you get the hang of this, it doesn't really take long to sit down and just contemplate what your goals are at the start of each week and make sure you identify which of those things are the most important things that you've got to do that week. And then the other thing you want to think about is the structure of your week. So that's where this happy week comes in. And I think the happy week was originally born out of a concept that I was taught about in the Strategic Coach Program. So Strategic Coach Program has this brilliant time system, which served me really, really well for many years. I think so where I'm going to go with this, I think, is an evolution of where I've taken the time system. But for that, I know a few of you in the room, Gareth as well, will have done Strategic Coach and know the time system. But the time system is one of Strategic Coach's most valuable concepts. And what it does is it teaches you about the fact that you have 3 days, focus days, and buffer days. So focus days are where you're doing the things that A, you love, and B, you're really good at. They're usually the 3 most profitable, most important things that you do for your business. So we've kind of talked about these as a concept in previous workshops. I tend to refer to them as flow activities because they're those activities that you love doing, they give you energy, and also you're really good at. But focus days are days where you spend at least 80% of your day doing those 3 activities, those 3 flow activities, nothing else. And ideally, over time, you get to the point where you spend, I think, Neil, you were saying 95% of your time is doing your unique ability or these focus activities or whatever. That's amazing. You gradually get rid of more and more of the other stuff. So those focus days are really important. The buffer days are there to set up amazing focus days. So the buffer days are like the admin, get rid of all of the crap so that when I'm on a focus day, I can focus on those amazing, those 3 amazing things. Then free days. So I've always been quite good at taking free days, or certainly in more recent years. But free days are the day that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. So free days are days where you're not working. Now, not working means not checking emails. It means not checking in at the office. It means not reading stuff to do with work. So I think this is a really, really important principle. If you want to, like if you're training for an Ironman, if you train really hard every day, you'll make a lot less progress than if you have days where different parts of your body are recovering. Now, I train every day, but my swimming days are essentially the opportunity for my legs to recover, and vice versa. And it's because those periods of recovery allow your body to, your muscle to grow. And the same applies to us mentally. And the problem with entrepreneurs is we're so focused on our business. When we go on holiday, I find it takes me a week of 3 days to really get work out of my head. And so if you're checking in on emails and taking the odd call, you're essentially getting a fraction of the value by taking time off. So I was really strict that these guys, and Victoria will verify this, when I went on two weeks holiday, it's like, right, you phone me if the office is burnt down or one of our top clients is leaving. Other than that, deal with it unless there is absolutely zero chance that you can, and it must happen before I get back, which would mean I would get 2 weeks of completely zero work. And the first week, you've still got work moving in the back end. You realize halfway through that second week, you're like, oh, I haven't thought about it at all. But it's that ability to have that space that's really, really important. So a free day is 24-hour period, according to Strategic Coach, is 24 hours of no work at all. So as a minimum, you must take 1 free day every week. As a minimum. Ideally, you'd have more than that. And you really have got to, when you have your free days, you've got to be really disciplined with saying, I'm not doing this. Because otherwise, to come back to the subconscious brain, you're not giving that brain the opportunity to kind of relax and recover. And the benefit of having proper free days is that you then end up coming back energized with way more enthusiasm, way more ideas, way better to get to take on the next challenge.
Sorry, just
yeah.
One question there. You said 3 days. Do you mean within 7-day week or 5 week?
7-day week. So as a minimum, 1 day should be completely clear of any work. Yeah. But that could be Sunday or Saturday or whatever.
You have to do 4-day week on the minimum.
No. And so, yes, Nitesh.
Yeah, no, the question following on from that is, does the 3 day include everyone else as well?
No.
Or have I got to still deal with my kids?
You've still got to deal with your kids. that might be, so that what you're describing is what gets termed as a golden free day, where you could just ditch everyone and you so really, really selfish, and you go, so golden free day. But it is really important. Now, I think that the reason I think that the time system is a brilliant concept is because what it does is it forces you to focus on the most important things in a certain amount of time. And gradually, what that means is it forces you to delegate more and more of the buffer, non-focus, non-flow activities, because you're trying to cram them into less and less time, aren't you? So you're forcing yourself to delegate more and more of the stuff that isn't your flow activities, which is like you've done, Neil. And that's fantastic. However, what I worked out as I've read more about this subject is the 24-hour period actually changes over the course of that. Over the course of the day, my energy and ability to perform at my best changes. So one of the great things about this time system is when you have a focus day, it's like, right, I'm not checking my emails at all. I'm just doing, when I was, running Efficient Portfolio, but mostly as an advisor, that meant that all I did on a focus day was see clients, speak to clients, or prospect for new clients. That's what it was in the early stages. And it forced me to get rid of everything else on those days, which means that when I'm in front of a client on one of those days, I'm likely to be in the zone. I'm going to deliver the best that I possibly can. And that worked, although actually over time, what I realized was, if I'm trying to be the best advisor I can be, I'm way better at that in the morning than I am in the afternoon. And I didn't really kind of process this thinking until I read a book by Dan Pink called When. And Dan Pink talks about how the vast majority of people have this daily cycle. So unless you're a night owl, about 20% of people are night owls, but unless you're a night owl, you go through this cycle during the day, which is essentially you wake up, once you've kind of cleared the post-caffeine haze, you hit your peak, and you hit your peak performance about mid to late morning. Then you have lunch, you go through the middle of the day and you hit this trough. I know I did a learning lunch on Damping's When, because it is a brilliant book. And then you have this rebound. Now, this rebound in late afternoon or early evening is good, but it tends to be better for different activities than that peak stage in the morning. And so like I said, 20% of people are night owls, and they have a slightly different approach, but that applies to 80% of people. The night owls actually have the reverse of that. So if you already know you're a night owl, you have the reverse, in that you have your rebound in the morning and your peak performance is that late afternoon, early evening slot, which is, so for those of you know that Tom, who was one of my advisors that was coming to some of these until recently, he was definitely a night owl, and he can absolutely nail his work in the evening way better than he can do it in the morning. But you'll probably remember when he did attend the workshops, he was kind of like never here on time. It was always, the mornings were just a struggle for him. And the research shows that actually, if you look at your performance, so assuming you're not a night owl, if you look at your performance in the afternoon versus the morning, it's the equivalent, the drop off in your performance is the equivalent to drinking the driving limit of alcohol versus the morning. So it's almost as if saying, right, I've got this really important meeting and I'm going to go and have a pint and a half before I go into it, just to sort of like take, and maybe that might improve your performance. I don't know, it doesn't improve mine, that's for sure. But this research has been taken they've done it on a lot of different studies. So they also did a study in, I think it was Norway, certainly Scandinavia, where they had students of the same year group taking the same exam, but some got the opportunity to take it in the morning, some got the opportunity to take it in the afternoon. And the drop-off in results for those that took it in the afternoon was the equivalent to having had a week off sick during the course of that academic year. If you go, so this is maybe a piece of advice, if you ever find yourself the wrong side of a courtroom and you have a judge about to give you some sort of decision and verdict, in the morning you will get a much more favorable decision than if you see the judge soon after lunch. So actually, even when we create these focus days, we need to realize that on a focus day, our performance in the afternoon is going to be different to the performance in the morning. And so what Damping talks about in When is how actually we're better at certain activities in that peak time and other in the rebound and trough time. So in the peak activity time, we are much better at doing stuff, bless you, we're much better at doing stuff that's analytical, much better at dealing with conversation and people. And in the afternoon, we're much better at the creative piece. So what started to evolve for me, having gone from focus days, and yet, that might mean 4 client meetings, the last of which is at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, or whatever. Like, actually, the 3 o'clock meeting is getting way less value out of me than the 9 o'clock meeting. So actually, would I not be better to restructure my week and have, like, morning is to deliver the best value I possibly can to clients. The afternoon might be writing my book or creating content, because that's when I'm actually much better attuned to that piece of work. So when we try and create this happy week, we want to start thinking about, well, actually, when should we have these different phases of time? Now, one of the things that Damping reiterated, which is, and what, again, Robin Sharma reiterated, I know we were talking about sleep, by getting up early, you're not trying to deprive yourself of sleep, you're just trying to make sure that you get the right amount of sleep, but you get up at the same time every day. And that seems to be, if you read Matt Walker's Why You Sleep, read Nick Hale's book, that seems to be one of the most common pieces of advice: get up at the same time every day. And so this isn't about depriving of your sleep. I actually offered to send you Victoria, could you make a note to send Richard the learning lunch that we did on sleep? And if anybody else would like that, I'll happily send that, because but sleep is obviously a really important factor in this. If you want to perform well, you've got to be getting the right amount of sleep. And as part of that happy week concept, one of the best pieces of advice I heard on a podcast, I can't remember who said it, was it's more important to set an alarm to go to bed than set an alarm to get up in the morning. If you set the alarm to go to bed at the right time, you'll almost certainly get up at the right time anyway. Which I think, and actually Apple now does that. If you don't have to ask it too hard to set a reminder to say bedtime is approaching. Also, something else that you might want to think about as part of your ideal day is napping. Napping, I don't nap as a general rule, but I have days, often Mondays, where actually I feel like a nap after lunch, if you're going to nap after lunch, is the best time to do that, and you might want to factor that into your happy week. It certainly improves a lot of the studies that show napping really improves performance. But again, the advice seems to be if you need to nap every day, you're probably not getting enough sleep at night.
So
yeah.
Say that nap does that, because I'm terrified of getting to bed anyway. Partly because I'm not but does this, if sometimes my lap's I don't nap because I'm going to make sure I get sleep and I get the right amount of sleep.
That's actually, yes. So, well, there's two answers to that. One is that the advice generally is if you're struggling to sleep at night, don't nap, because you exactly don't want to release that melatonin. Where the description I've heard it is it's like a break, and as soon as you release it, you kind of take some of the melatonin out, and then you've got less ability to go to sleep later on. And so, yes, if you're struggling to get to sleep, it's better avoided. But the other piece of advice is that you don't want to nap beyond about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because you should still have enough melatonin building up from that point on. But napping is a useful tool that you can, and I've been in coaching workshops where one of the attendees, I don't know if perhaps you didn't see it, but one of the attendees in my coaching workshop will literally sit there and have a nap after he goes off, has his lunch, and then he comes back into the workshop room and don't want to, you're kind of tiptoeing around, not wanting to disturb him. But it is an important concept. One of the things, again, that you might want to build into your happy week. So we've talked about morning exercise, but actually doing a second, more gentle workout in the evening is also a really powerful thing. So that's more like things like a walk or yoga or Pilates, or that sort of stuff of an evening is also a really powerful concept. Is kind of you're doubling up in your exercise. It's a great way of kind of, particularly if you could be outside as the sun is going down, that's an incredible thing to build into a happy week. And in fact, that ties in with something that I couldn't remember whether I was going to mention today or not, but Fitbit did some research around around when people exercise, and what they found was that there's basically two peaks of when people exercise: 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And the 6 a.m.ers exercise twice as often as the 6 p.m.ers, because nothing gets in the way, does it? But interestingly, as we were talking about outside, the research would say you're more likely to do a PB in the afternoon. You're of the right mindset to deliver a better performance, but you're more likely to actually do the exercise if you're training first thing in the morning. So that's kind of a balance, but ultimately we're not generally trying to knock out PB every day, are we? So it's just interesting. If you want to read more on that, Alex Hutchinson's Endure is a really good book. And also when it comes to sleep, the 6 a.m. workout will help you sleep better, whereas that's why you generally better having a lighter, less intense workout in the evening. I know when I used to do martial arts, I'd get back at sort of like 10 o'clock and I'd be absolutely wired and couldn't go to sleep. And so doing the intense workout first thing in the morning is definitely better. One of the other concepts that I've heard from a few people is the concept of making sure that you do, and this ties in really well with that with the flow activities, is making sure that the first 90 minutes of every day is doing the most important thing that you do in your business. You know, whatever that is in your business, it should be the first thing that you do. You do, Brian Tracy talks about eat the frog. Just do the most important thing. It might not be the thing that you enjoy the most, but actually often it is. But if you do that most important thing first, you're going to get so much more done over the course of that day. But you're also going to make sure you do those most important things. Ultimately, what gets scheduled gets done. Planning and doing that first, and a concept that I've used that where I've been like, I knew I had a deadline to meet for writing a book. Right, I'm just going to do that for the first hour of every day, and then I'll just do a normal work day thereafter. And then one concept that you might want to think about is you might actually have more than one happy week. So over the course of this year, I've refined my happy week, and I created the 5x5 and the 4x4. So my 5x5 working week or happy week is when I'm in Rutland. And because I was down to a 4-day week. So well, actually, I don't know what to do on a Friday morning. Everyone else is working. I might as well there's only so much training you can do. So actually, I concluded 5 hours a day, 5 days a week was a better way of me working. It meant that I didn't work Friday afternoons if I wanted. And generally speaking, it doesn't work out quite as simplistic as that. I'll probably finish at 5 o'clock a couple of days, and I might finish earlier on other days. But that's my mindset: is 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. When I'm in Cornwall, and we spent the whole summer in Cornwall, so it wasn't like I'm going to take the whole summer as 3 days. I knew I wanted to do some work, but I also wanted more free time than I have when I'm up here. I then did the 4x4. So 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. So it might be that you want different happy weeks for different times in your life. And then the final piece I want you to just think about before I get you designing your own happy week is, so I met this amazing public speaker when I was speaking at MDRT in Nashville. So Heidi Denning, who were you in Nashville? I can't remember. You were in Nashville, weren't you? You weren't sober there. I don't think anyone in Nashville's sober. So I ended up having dinner with Heidi, who was one of the keynote speakers there. I can't even remember why or how. Oh, that's it. She contacted me on LinkedIn, and then we ended up with a table with Carl Harty. So there was, again, a lot of wine drunk at that. But she had some just interesting reflections on how you should think about your time. And this concept of, so her equivalent of the happy week was be still for 10 minutes a day. So 10 minutes a day of calm, find joy for 1 hour a week, chill out for 1 day a month, and live life 1 week a quarter. I thought that was just a nice way of framing essentially what we're trying to do with this concept of the happy week. So with the happy week, like I said, so for me, this was an exercise and this is an exercise I revisit every year. Because every year I'm thinking, okay, given where I am in my business life, my personal life, my fitness life, what does the happy week look like? And the reason it's brilliant to revisit this time and again and get it really clear is because the more you can communicate this with your team, the better they can be at helping you execute your happy week. So, for example, if Victoria knows when these type of meetings go here, these types of activities go, so I'll have an afternoon blocked out for content creation. I'll have times blocked out where she knows where calls should go, where important meetings should go. The more that's detailed, the better that she can arrange my diary. Again, same with clients. Clients knew that I had a London focused day and a Rutland focused day. My London focused day historically was Wednesday. So they knew that that's when I was going to be there. And whilst you can shuffle it around, that was the ideal. It just creates simplicity in their life, simplicity in the team's life. Everyone knows where they're going if you've designed the happy week. And I've talked about this concept in a previous workshop where we talked about how, as a minimum, you should be taking 1 day a week off, 1 week a quarter off, 1 day a week off. I can't, hang on, what is it? 1 day a week off, that's it. 1 week a quarter as a minimum, and ideally take 1 year in every 5 off. I love this concept of taking 1 year in every 5 off because, pardon? Start with that, yeah. But actually, what you're doing is you're saying, well, okay, I can either have, say, 20 years of retirement when I'm between 65 and 85, or 40 years in retirement if you listen to us when we talk about longevity stuff. But or when I'm beyond 65, or could we be preloading that and saying, well, I'll have 5 years less of retirement, but I'm going to have spells during my working life off. And in fact, I remember reading a book by somebody or listening to him on a podcast, I can't remember, but he literally, religiously took 1 year off every 5, and it forced him to rethink his life. But it was basically he's just front loading his retirement. But nature abhors a vacuum. Essentially, if we don't delegate stuff, we don't assign activities to, whether it's during the week or during the year, our time gets filled up because it just gets filled up with admin and work and emails and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you put the most important things in first, it's amazing how you still seem to get everything else done.